Hello, team. Welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. The Ukraine War news update. Just a little bit of geopolitical news to share with you. Only one little topic. It turns out that I hadn't set my clock on my phone to automatic time zones. I've woken up an hour early. I've had very little sleep. I'm exhausted and I'm an hour ahead of myself. So I've just got a little time to just talk about this. So, what's going on? There's a lot of issue with Mike Johnson in the House of Representatives in the US concerning the Ukrainian aid bill. We'll get to that, but what's the precursor to that? Actually, I neglected to talk about in the last few videos what's happening with David Cameron. So, David Cameron is now our foreign minister. Previously, he was prime minister of the UK. He was called back, given a peerage, which means he's a lord in the House of Lords, so that he's able to be given the position of foreign secretary. And in this role, he is actually being quite forthright and I think doing a pretty good job on behalf of Ukraine and the UK government. So, the Politico article here says shouting match UK's David Cameron preps for a battle over Ukraine. Bust up with Russia's Sergei Lavrov is on the card, but Britain's top diplomat has allies in his sights too. So there is going to be basically the Munich Security Conference taking place today, where Lavrov is due to attend and David Cameron's due to attend, and he's got Lavrov in his crosshairs. But actually, prior to this, David Cameron's been quite forthright with regard to the US. So, a taste of pushback in store for Cameron came on Wednesday, with US politicians struggling to agree aid to Kyiv. Cameron appealed to them directly in an article in The Hill. So, we're going to come to that in a second. I do not want to show this weakness displayed against us to show weakness displayed against Hitler in the 1930s, he wrote. Republican Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, a key Donald Trump ally, had a comeback at the ready. Frankly, he can kiss my ass. So that is a US politician saying the UK can kiss my ass. The foreign secretary can kiss my ass. And that shows you, I think, where that portion of the GOP is. Now, Cameron made similar pleas ahead of the Munich conference, urging other nations to show unity, which that isn't, and that we have the will to see this through. Attendees Friday include US Vice President Kamala Harris and German Chancellor Olaf Scholz. Ukraine President Zelensky is also expected to show up. Okay, so let's have a look at the David Cameron article in The Hill. David Cameron passed Ukraine funding for the sake of global security. This is David Cameron's words directly. He wrote this: I welcome the US Senate passing the National Security Supplemental Bill on Monday. This funding package before Congress, including support for Ukraine, matters greatly to the UK and European security. I want to explain why. I believe in our special relationship between the US and the UK, our partnership in defense of freedom. This is a personal for me. My grandfather stormed the beaches of Normandy, undercovering far from US warships. And as Prime Minister, I ordered the UK military to join the US in driving the Islamic State death cult out of Syria and Iraq. These were, so this is very clever kind of rhetoric from David Cameron, which is appealing to the idea of the US doing this marvelous job in the Second World War and supporting UK troops in D-Day. That unity, that working together against a common enemy, and sort of giving a parallel of Hitler to Putin, but also saying, and you know what, we came to the US assistance in Syria and Iraq. These were terrorists who had beheaded our citizens, British and American, in the desert. Together, we ensured they could never carry out such awful acts again. As Foreign Secretary, I'm once again privileged to see how closely Britain and the US and our allies work in standing up for our freedom. We joined you in backing Israel after the horrors of October the 7th. We joined you in strikes against Houthi militias seeking to disrupt freedom of navigation in the Red Sea, and we joined together over the last 2 years to stand up for freedom in Ukraine. Since I visited Washington before Christmas, Europe has proven its determination to stay its course. The European states have provided more than half of the support to Ukraine, with aid collectively totaling $170 billion to date. So this is again then addressing the disinformation given out by certain GOP politicians that the US has spent like this crazy amount of money that hasn't been true at the time of saying, and then saying that Europe's done nothing. The reality is that actually Europe has done an awful lot. The European Union has agreed to a $50 billion multi-year funding package of its own. Germany doubled its military aid to Ukraine last month, and Britain has become the first country to sign a bilateral security agreement with Kyiv, an example of which we expect several partners to follow in the coming weeks. This assistance is making a difference. We have already destroyed almost half of Russia's pre-war military capacity at the cost of less than 10% of any national defense budget. It's Vladimir Putin who should be fearing failure. Almost a quarter of his Black Sea fleet has been sunk. He suffered almost 300,000 dead and wounded, more in 2 years of fighting than the Soviet Union suffered in Afghanistan over a decade. Russia has witnessed its first attempted coup in 3 decades and its first debt default in over a century. Now we face a choice, a simple test. I mean, this is good stuff from Cameron. On the one side is Putin, hoping to enlarge his empire simply by outlasting the West. He believes we are weak. He believes we can get away with the most shocking act of national aggression, or he can get away with that. National aggression we have seen in our lifetimes. On the other side are all of us. We have the resources, the economic might, the expertise. Our economic strength outweighs Russia by a factor of around 25 to 1. They're having to turn to Pyongyang, so North Korea, for help. All we need to do is make our strength pay. The question is, do we have the will? As Congress debates the votes on this funding package for Ukraine, I'm going to drop all diplomatic niceties. So he's getting quite serious here. I urge Congress to pass it. I want us all, US, UK, Europe, European, and other allies, to support Ukraine in fighting against completely unjustified aggression. It's hard to think of a clearer case of one country being invaded by another without the slightest justification. Boom. Yes, he's dropping truth here. Um, I believe our joint history shows the folly of giving in to tyrants in Europe who believe in redrawing boundaries by force. I do not want us to show the weakness displayed against Hitler in the 1930s. He came back for more, costing us far more lives to stop his aggression. I do not want us to show the weakness displayed against Putin in 2008 when he invaded Georgia, or the uncertainty of the response in 2014 when he took Crimea and much of the Donbass before coming back to cost us far more with his aggression in 2022. This is so well put together. I want us to show the strength displayed since 2022 as the West has helped Ukrainians liberate half its territory seized by Putin, all without the loss of any NATO service personnel. We must all ask ourselves who is watching. America is strong enough to both protect itself at home and recognize that threats in Europe and Asia affect its own security. I, for one, would like Beijing and Tehran to see that. We have proved that the dangers of escalation are illusory. Britain was the first to provide everything from anti-tank weapons for artillery, to artillery to tanks, and now long-range fires like Storm Shadow missiles. Each time Putin has rattled his saber about escalation, and each time it has been empty rhetoric. So let us do it. It goes to the heart of what both sides of the aisle stand for, what both of our countries stand for. We fight aggression. We stand up for freedom. We stick to by our friends. We show this dangerous, uncertain world that we are unbending in our will, and we win. Right, which was really strong stuff. And then uh, you've got Marjorie Taylor Greene saying, "You can kiss my ass." Just beggars belief, really. And if indeed, this is what she said, David Cameron should be concerned about the Nazis in Ukraine's army, the Azov battalion. Have we gone back 2 years to listen to like overt Russian propaganda? Like, what are you doing, Marjorie? All of you, not a single one of my viewers should ever give her the time of day. There should be no respect for that woman. This is like terrible. She says, "We're all sick of the absurd name calling." No one called anyone names. David Cameron just wrote, did you read it? He wrote a decent appeal for US unity and support of Ukraine in line with previous Allied um, unity and in line with history and the Second World War and Syria and Iraq and etc. etc. And then all she can say is, "We're sick of all the absurd name calling. It isn't going to bully me into funding the war in Ukraine." Here, a Polish source says recently Poland's prime minister took flack for calling out MAGA reps over blocking Ukraine aid. Now take a long, hard look. This is one of the MAGA crew still mad at Poland's prime minister, or maybe it's time to get furious at folks like Marjorie for ruining America's alliances instead. Because as you can see, they're literally repeating Russian lies about Ukraine, which Putin used to justify the war. And we in Europe are supposed to be diplomatic about this because what if the other guy wins the election, etc.? Or simply call these people out for driving the Reagan legacy into the ground and siding with dictators. Let that sink in. American lawmakers playing into Russia's hands. I say we speak up. This is not just domestic politics. It has global impact, and Ukrainian troops and civilians are getting killed by Russian invaders because a few people keep obstructing the funding bill. Right. So this is where it's at. Then you've had throw that into that Mike Turner, who is Republican head of the Intelligence Committee, right? He knows what's going on, right? He's got a good um, handle of things, and he's one who let out about this space-based weapon that America and her allies are worried about, right? So then he's been accused by other Republicans of letting that out to try and get Ukraine aid. So Republican Congressman Mike Turner he didn't demand the inquiry. Actually, Andy Ogles demanded an inquiry into the GOP chairman of the House Intelligence Committee for publicly disclosing highly classified national security information. Turner confirmed the existence of a serious national security threat and called for President Biden to declassify the information. Republican Congressman Andy Ogles requested an investigation into Turner's actions. I mean, this really annoys me. So rather than saying, "Oh my goodness, what is it that you're talking about? What's this serious thing up there?" and getting people to actually be concerned about what Russia is doing, he says, we need to investigate you for saying stuff that I don't think you should have said. I'm going to ignore that whole subject about what you're talking about and just attack you because, and here it comes, Republican congressman requested an investigation into Turner's actions, claiming they were motivated by the desire for additional funding to Ukraine. Might well be, but it doesn't mean it ain't right to think about these things. And passage of an unreformed Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. So it's all going wrong, and this is really where this is heading now. This is the main actually subject matter for what I wanted to talk about here. So the Senate has voted 70 to 29 to pass that bill for Ukraine and Taiwan and Israel aid, which was obviously all the history about not going to do it. So then it got tied to the border because the border was so important. So then the Republicans said, no, yeah, we want a serious border deal. So then a bipartisan team got together and created a serious border deal. And then Republicans said, no, that's not good enough. You can't have that and drop that. But then they were saying, it's the aid to Ukraine is contingent upon the border reform. When border reform was offered, they denied it, and so they deny aid to Ukraine. Then they've separated the two, and then they're still saying no, it's tied to the border. No, it's not tied to the border. Why are you choosing this to be tied to the border and nothing else in American politics? You don't say the education thing came out, some education policy came out. No, we're not doing that until the border's sorted out, or some kind of I don't know, medical reform over there, or anything else international. If you're worried that it's only something international, any foreign policy issue at all. You say you can't do that until we do the border. In other words, since the border is not going to be done until November, you're basically saying no politics can be done until November. Are you seriously interested in governing for your country? Do you want your country to make the right decision, or is everything just about trying to get Trump in and screw the country in the meantime? I'm gonna create a dumpster fire here just because it expedites getting Donald Trump in. So I'm going to screw over my own country for what I believe is a greater good of some dictatorial person coming in and taking over, because that's what it looks like, right? So the White House has now criticized Mike Johnson. This is absolutely egregious for going on recess without approving the Ukraine aid bill. So Ukraine aid has passed through Senate. He goes, oh, shall I put this to the floor? I'm going to go on a 2-week holiday. Oh, well, see you later. Meanwhile, Avdiivka's burning. Meanwhile, Ukrainians are dying. I've been there, mate. Have you? Not to Avdiivka, but fairly damned close, I can tell you. What do you know about Ukraine? What's your problem with Ukraine, Mike Johnson? Get your pathetic arse out to Ukraine, speak to some people, and then make a decision that's based on reality, instead of making a decision that's based on getting your cult idol into power. White House criticized the US Speaker Mike Johnson for starting House recess without voting on Senate-approved Ukraine aid package. It's an absolute shocker. Johnson contends that the Senate bills lacks the stricter border security measures requested by House Republicans, and agreed upon by Republicans, but then denied by other Republicans because you don't want to govern, you just want Trump. And he refuses to advance it to the lower chamber. White House spokesperson Andrew Bates, in a memo obtained by The Hill, criticized Johnson for prematurely starting the recess, accusing him of exacerbating harm to national security. Quote, every day that Speaker Johnson causes our national security to deteriorate, America loses. True. And every day that he puts off a clean vote, congressional Republicans standing with the American people plunges. Bates said, running away for an early vacation only worsens both problems. So, look, you may be a Republican out there. You might just think it's always Biden's fault. And you might look at me and say, well, you're always trying to get Biden off the hook here. To me, this is really bloody simple, right? There's only a few people who are responsible for 4 months of delays to aid to Ukraine that has pretty much caused the fall of Avdiivka. Right? There's only a certain number of people, and I'll name them: Donald Trump, Mike Johnson, Marjorie Taylor Greene, and that MAGA community, Mike Lee, Rand Paul. Although it got through Senate, now we're looking really at Mike Johnson and those pressuring him as he's caught between a rock and a hard place between wanting to do what's right and realizing that if he does what's right, he loses his job because he gets kicked out as speaker because people like Marjorie Taylor Greene hold too much power because they are just lapdogs to Donald Trump. It absolutely infuriates me. Michael McKay here saying Mike Johnson recessed the House of Representatives without taking up the security bill. He deserted his post during the height of the Battle of Avdiivka, as Putin wanted him to. So, like, you now getting all these memes. Like, this man has sold Ukraine out. He's also sold America out. I helped to do this. This is not a good look. Mike Johnson is a Russian asset. Two of the trending hashtags on Twitter at the moment is Mike Johnson is a Russian traitor, and no, Speaker Johnson is Russian traitor, and Speaker Johnson is Putin asset or something like that. The choice is clear: on your oath to defend the Constitution or support Russia's attack on the United States. Says this meme. I know these are just memes, but this is what's going around at the moment, and it's not making American politicians look good in the international community and even in the American community. Avdiivka, I did that. It's just it's not a cool situation. And just to throw something else, I meant to mention this yesterday. Uh, Talking about, and this is something while I was on the road with Greg and Zhenya, and we were talking about Starlink terminals, and they said it's long been known that they've got thousands of Starlink terminals. Russia are using thousands of terminals. I was like, that's interesting. That's what their Zhenya's uh, um, contacts have been telling him. Well, now Budanov, the intelligence chief of Ukraine, has come out and said Russia is using thousands of SpaceX Starlink terminals in Ukraine. Russian forces in Ukraine are using thousands of Starlink satellite communications terminals made by Elon Musk's SpaceX, the Ukrainian military intelligence chief told the Wall Street Journal. And apparently that is compromising Ukrainian communications. So I just thought I'd throw that other piece of great news in there. Mike Johnson, Elon Musk, these are all like useful idiots for Putin. Putin is laughing all the way to the Kremlin after his morning breakfast. All his Christmases have come at once because you get absolute idiots, wingnuts like Mike Johnson doing his bidding. Just absolutely, you can tell I'm really angry. I'm going to get on a flight and just sleep and not think about this because I don't want to be this angry again today. Sorry, there you go. That's how I feel, and I'm not going to hold back. And do you know what? I'm not going to agree that this is it's just the Democrats' fault. Border security. This is feck all to do with border security. This has to do with international global security, and Americans should be at the forefront of that if they want to remain at the top of the global hegemony. If they want to reap the benefits of being the most powerful nation in the world, then they have responsibilities there as well, and they are reneging on their responsibilities at the moment. And goodness knows why. Well, DJT, you know, I'm not laying this at the feet of the Democrats here. I am laying this at the feet of several wingnut GOP politicians. And to me, it is that simple.